Hey guys, this is Arman speaking. Thanks for coming and attending this exclusive webinar that will be held by Dan Stine. And I'm actually going to just introduce him and give the floor to him. I have an honor to introduce him, Dan Stine, who is the BIM Administrator at LHB US, author and instructor, architect with 20 years of experience, and as he said, an avid Revista user. So he's going to be sharing, as we shared with you in information initially, his experience with Revisto, and you'll see a bit different type of webinar rather than we do every month. And that'd be great to see, other experiences that our users are having, and we're very appreciated that Dan wanted to share his experience today. Dan, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself and you can start. Thanks.
Okay, great, Armin. Thanks a lot, and thanks everybody for your interest in my take on Revizto. I should mention, just as a disclaimer at first, is Armin and the Revizto guys are paying me a ton of money to do this presentation. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I suggested it. I think the software is really cool, and the most compelling part about what I'm going to show you today is everything that I'm going to present can be done with the free version of their software, with the exception of the view sharing that you'll have the option to do later, just so that you can see the presentation better. So I'm going to spare you any additional information about my bio, and that was also part of the registration page anyways, if you're interested. With the one exception, I want to make a quick plug that for the Rtc Asia Conference that's coming up in 2 weeks, I will be presenting 3 sessions, and it is in Singapore, and on the little island off of Singapore called Sentosa, where the resort and conference location is. Adjacent to that is Universal Studios Singapore. So my family is coming with me, and we're looking forward to having lots of fun there. So if you can make plans, if you're definitely in the area, or if you're elsewhere and want to travel there, that would be a good time, I think. A good time will be had by all. It's a user conference for users by users, so it's really good information. All right, so I'm going to jump right in and show you a really quick overview of the whole process using one model, and then I'm going to switch gears and use a different model and cover more detailed options. So first of all, I'm going to use this Revit model of my company's Minneapolis office. So LHB, and this office was just awarded the LEED CI Platinum achievement, and it's a pretty cool model. So you'll see once we export this how quickly we can do it, and how all the decals and materials come through. So one of the first things you want to do in this is part of the really quick overview now, is create a special view that you can export. So it has all the things showing that you want to see in Reviso, and then it also has things like phasing and design options set. So you can see in this model there are 2 design options. One of them is related to 3 different carpet options that we had in the project during the design, and then another one is a trick that I've come up with and presented on before, of creating a design option where the primary option is empty. So for construction documents, things like entourage and other extraneous things that are really more for presentations and renderings, those can be in this secondary design option. And I even named it, to make sense for the design team, make visible in rendering views. So when you create your export view, it needs to look exactly like you want it to look in the visualization tool, Revizto. So we're going to click on the add-in tool. So once we install the free software, we get a plugin in Revit, and it's just a simple option here, export to Revizto. So I click on it, and then I have an option. In this case, I'm going to make a new project, and I'm not going to export sheets. I'm going to cover all of this in more detail later. One thing that I'll point out real quick is that in the Documents folder under Visera is where the files are saved. So right now you can see there's no folder or file here called temp. So I'm going to click OK. And so this just takes a few minutes to translate the information from Revit into the Revizto editor. So the editor, as the name implies, is a workspace where you can make changes to materials and lighting and things like that. And then the last step is exporting to the viewer mode. And so once you're in the viewer mode, things are optimized, kind of like a gaming environment where you can navigate the model really smoothly. And this can be done with the 3D mouse. So let me show you that real quick while the model is exporting. So this is the 3D mouse that I'm going to use in this presentation. I've had one of these for years, and just lately software has been coming out like Revizto where you can actually use this. I find that in Revit it's too clunky. Revit's trying to do more than just visualize the model, so it's really hard to navigate within Revit using that particular tool. But here I find it really indispensable. So here you can see in just a couple of minutes the model has already been exported to the editor, and nothing was done in this Revit model to really kind of prepare something to make it look better for you. So what that means is pretty much at any time during the design process you can push this model out to the editor and then to the viewer, and then use it for internal design critiques or meetings with clients. There's lots of really cool stuff. So now that we have it in the editor, I'm not going to do anything else in the editor except for push it out to the viewer. So I'm going to click on Review, and while that's doing that, I'll switch back over to the File folder, and now you can see there's a couple of files here called temp. The main one that we're interested in is the one with the extension .vim proj. So this file is both the project file and the viewer. And that's the file that you would share with somebody if you wanted to share it with a client or a contractor and you weren't using the collaborative tool. So as I mentioned, everything I'm going to show you in this presentation is using the free tools, and then when you want to use their issue tracker and some of the construction administration tools, that's where you have to start paying for the software. But this free stuff is really cool and a really great way to get your feet wet in the software. So now that the model has been exported to the viewer, there's lots of really interesting things we can do here. The first of which is click on this icon for viewpoints and see all of the 3D views that were created in Revit. So you could create additional ones in the editor and here in the viewer as well. But for now, we'll just look at the ones that came directly out of Revit. So I'm going to go to this one called Rendering View Gathering Space. So this is the same view that was on the screen in Revit when we first started the presentation. And here you can see that all the decals that were mapped on these marketing boards. So you can see on the right there's a solid glass wall with some vertical aircraft cable, and then there's all of these marketing boards that are connected to the aircraft cable. And then also you'll notice on the left above the door there's an exit sign. So all of those were set up in Revit. And the one thing I'm going to do here real quick, well actually before I start walking around, I'm going to click on a couple other views. So you can see there's a conference pod, is what I like to call it, just a floating conference room with its own separate roof or ceiling. So whenever you have a 3D view in Revit that has a section box employed in it, that is respected in the Revizto viewer. So I'm going to click on this conference pod section box. And so everything I've done so far, I've used the mouse with my right hand. I'm right-handed. And then with my left hand now, I'm starting to use the 3D mouse. And so I find this to be the most efficient way to move around in the viewer, because you can move this in multiple directions at one time. Whereas if you're using the Revit or SketchUp type navigation, it's a little bit more limiting, or if you're using the gaming mode as well. So within this view here, I can look down and see the carpet that was defined within one of the design options. So one thing to be aware of is the 3D view that you set up and export from. All the phasing and design options and anything that's visible in that view is automatically going to be the only thing visible in all the other saved 3D views. So if this view that I clicked on here, conference pod underscore section box, actually was set to have a different option for the carpet, I would still see the option that was defined in the view that I exported from. So we have a couple of cool little conference rooms like this, and you can see how this would be really compelling to a client to see this. Here's another item. We have a phone booth. I like to think of it as the, well, actually I want the section box one. So this is our office TARDIS here. If there's any Doctor Who fans out there. When I went to the Rtc Europe conference last October in Ireland, my kids and my wife came along, and my kids are huge Doctor Who fans, so we went on a road trip through Wales to Cardiff so we could check out the Doctor Who museum and experience. But here you can see the quality of the materials. So all the custom materials came out when we did this export. I'm going to quickly go back to the gathering space, and now on the tools across the top, I'm going to switch from airplane mode to walk mode. And so I did that couple of clicks with the mouse, and now I'm going to use the 3D mouse. And when you turn on walk mode, you're set at a predetermined height, and gravity and collision is turned on. But what's interesting about collision, and I really like actually, is that a lot of things aren't factored into collision, like the furniture. I just walked through the tables and chairs. It gets a little bit clumsy if you have to walk around every little feature in the model. So floors, walls, railings, and stairs are all part of collision detection. But you can walk through doors, curtain wall, glass, basically. And so I'm kind of trying to move slow here, because during the webinar, watching this kind of video can be a little clunky. And so you'll see the dramatic difference a little bit later on when we start sharing the same model. If you have the software installed and participate in the sharing, which actually information was sent to you about.
Can I interrupt you in a second? Just sorry to tell everybody, because I forgot that we have shared the model that Dan actually created, the law office, with everyone who is in who is in this webinar. So that'd be great. While Dan is presenting, you would just have open on any platform that you're using our Revista viewer, and as soon as you open that Revista viewer, you will see the project that we shared with you and have it ready for the camera shared feature, so you'd see how smooth it works later on. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Not a problem at all. So one thing I forgot to mention, in the Revit environment, was to point out the fact that there was a mechanical and electrical model being linked in to the architectural model. So all the information from those links are showing up here as well. You can see up above there's the fabric duct showing up and all of the LED light fixtures. All right, so I think that's all I wanted to show you for this really quick overview. And like I said, what's really super cool about this is that everything I just showed you can be done with their free software. And there's a lot more to it that I'm going to cover now. We'll take another pass at all that, looking at things and options in more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and quit out of the viewer. And so if I wanted to, in this case I do, I could select these temp files that I just created. And you can see they're not too big, pretty easy files to manage and share. So I can delete those, and actually got to wait a couple minutes for the rights to free up. Actually I'm in the file here in the editor, so that's probably my main problem. All right, so I'm going to close this LHB model. And so now I'm switching to this law office model. If you've watched any of the tutorial videos on the Revizto website, you'll notice they've used my model in a couple of those. And this is the model from my interior design Revit textbook. So all the materials and the interesting ceilings and furniture are all described, in that textbook. So we're in Revit again. We're going to set up a 3D view, as I mentioned. So I like to actually name it Revizto Export View. And so we have this view set up, and I go into VV and make sure everything I want to see is turned on. I'm going to make sure the detail level is set to fine. In my case, that's typically how I want it. Phasing, again, design options. Another really interesting thing that you can do, and this is partly more of a Revit trick, but it also affects the export. If you have a topo surface in your model, which is usually nice to have, if you engage that topo surface with a section box, that's by doing that, you actually see the edge of the earth, basically. If you don't have a section box engaging the topo surface, it just looks like a flat plane without a thickness. It still has the correct slope to it, but it doesn't have the correct thickness. So we've created this view. Maybe we took some time to create some additional 3D views within Revit so that they're available in the export, and we don't have to create those later. And then every time we do the export, those 3D views will be there as well. So I think that's all we want to do in Revit in terms of setup. And then we're going to go to the Add-ins tab again and select Export to Revizto. And so now we're going to create another new project. And I'll call this one Test, because temp still exists. And then in the last example, I did not export the sheets. In this example, I will. And so you can use sheets for two different purposes, from my take anyways. One is for a visualization purpose, as we'll look at. And then another one would be if you're using the software as part of construction administration, having the sheets readily available within the context of the viewer would be really helpful. Obviously, this next one is straightforward. Run the Revizto Editor after the export is done, kind of like show me the PDF after I create a PDF. And then the third option here is use render appearance. So this has to do with the materials, and the render appearance are the actual textures that are used. For example, when you're doing a photorealistic rendering in Revit. If that's not checked, then just the shaded surfaces are going to show up. So if you're exporting a really large model, like right now we're working on a 1.4 million square foot existing model, creating an as-built for a client. And so I've unchecked this so that I can export the entire model with MEP and lots of piping and things like that in there, and more smoothly navigate the project. Another option, if you want the render appearance in a large project like that, might be to export smaller chunks, like a department or one floor at a time. You can export a large model like that with render appearance, but you know, there's give and take in performance and quality with anything. So we'll go ahead and click OK to create a new project. This time, because I had export sheets selected, I'm prompted as to which sheets I want to export. So maybe I don't want the schedule sheet, but all these other views I do want. So I'll hit OK. And so at the end of this presentation, I'm also going to show you how we can look at the model using the Oculus Rift. And that is actually really easy. So you can actually buy the Oculus Rift right now. It's called the DK2. I believe that's what it's called. Actually, yeah, DK2. And so it's not available commercially, but anybody can still buy it, and you just have to accept some language saying that you acknowledge that this is still in development and not a final consumer product. So that's how the one that I have was purchased. And so Reviso is set up to work with that particular virtual reality headset, and it works quite well between that and the 3D mouse. So once we export this model into the editor, we'll be able to look at some things that we can adjust if we want to. We could go back into Revit and make some of these changes, but perhaps there's some quick little tweaks we want to make with materials or lighting or information associated with individual objects, and all of those things can be done in the editor without affecting the Revit model. In fact, any changes made in Reviso do not have a direct impact on the Revit model ever, so that's just important to know. So now that we're in the editor, the first thing that you'll notice, and I'm going to use the 3D mouse to just kind of zoom into the model here, is that all the lighting shows up in the model. We're going to get to the lighting in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes, but that's just kind of a really cool wow factor. The first thing we're going to look at here is the materials. So I'm just going to kind of work through some of these tabs and talk about a few things that we can do in the context of the editor, and then we'll get into the viewer. There's some overlap between what you can do in the editor and the viewer, so I'll save those for just looking at in the viewer. When the materials tab is active, that basically engages a special mode where when you double click on something, it opens the materials properties for that surface. So you can see this grass material looks kind of maybe a larger scale than it should. So, and actually I didn't have to double click, I just single clicked on it. And it opens up this dialog box. It's a little different than the settings that you see in Revit, but they're very intuitive. So I can change the scale of the grass just by adjusting this scale U and V settings. And so you can see the material changes scale in real time. So I'll go ahead and close that. Another thing we can do, and before I do that, I want to jump into a different view. So I'm going back to the Home tab. I'll select Viewpoints, and this shows me all the 3D views that were created in the Revit model. So View from Entry. So I jump into this 3D view, and I haven't double checked what's going on here, if it's something with my Revit model or the export process. but needless to say, this plaid material is not what I selected for these chairs, all right? So I'm going to select materials again, so that I'm in the tab that allows me to just click on something and see information about the material. So here I see it's a steel case material. So my interior design textbook uses a lot of real-world manufacturer content, so like steel case and coalesce and Shaw flooring and USG ceiling tiles. So now that I know what this material is, I'll go to the library command, and I could visually find this one pretty quickly as well. One thing I've noticed, if you do have linked models, you might end up with the same material in the list here more than once. So if you wanted to actually replace this particular material, you might have to do it more than once. So there's a handy little search dialog box in the upper right. So I can take one material and drag it from the right to the left to overwrite another material within the editor. And so you can see all these chairs just updated rather quickly. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is Illumination. So when you click on Illumination, all these little symbols that are called helpers show up. So you can turn those off if you don't want to see those, but they really only show up here in the editor. And so similar to when you were on the Materials tab, and you could select something and edit a material, when you're on the Illumination tab, you can select one of these helpers and see the properties for it. So this is kind of cool, the spotlights that are on the wall here. I can adjust the cone angle, and you see it adjust in real time on the wall, which is super cool. You can adjust the angle. So if you want to tip them up or down. And then just the overall intensity. So this affects a lot of things. One thing to note, and I've done a lot of presentations on lighting design in Revit, specifically using an add-in called Illum Tools. I've done some presentations on that in 3 different countries, and so I have a kind of a special interest in lighting design. And so the Revizto Editor and Viewer are really great design tools for lighting at a design level, but for professional lighting design and calculations, you'll want to note that it substitutes the photometry from the Revit families with basically generic light sources like point light and spotlight, and for this visualization feature, you know, that's perfectly fine, and we have the ability to make some adjustments like this. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. That was a question I asked when I first started looking at it. So let's see, that's the lighting. Well, we're not done with the lighting yet. You can turn the lighting completely off if you just want to focus on daylighting, but we'll keep the lighting on for right now. And one thing that you need to know is that when you export this model to the viewer, the artificial lighting doesn't show up unless you run a calculation. And so that's done in this light maps dialog box. So if you turn on light map calculation, and then you can adjust the quality. So obviously, again, there's a trade-off between time and quality. So if we crank this all the way up, it actually could take an hour or 2 to process. And if we expand this detailed controls, we see some of the options that we can adjust. So if I crank this up to high quality, we can kind of compare the settings here between high and low quality. Another thing that happens in this process is the lights are actually baked onto the surfaces. So the materials end up getting replaced with materials that already have the light qualities, such as the hot spots and the ambient occlusion type shadows baked into the materials. and that allows you to navigate in the viewer a lot faster, but still have that kind of ambiance of artificial lighting. So to do this, then you'd click Calculate and let it process. I'm going to ignore that right now and export to the viewer without that. And then once we switch to the shared version of the model, you'll see that particular model has been calculated. So that's all for the lighting.
You have to turn it off, otherwise your light maps right now is on. Otherwise, when you click to review it.
Oh, it was off.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, well, I didn't think I turned it off either once you mentioned that, but maybe because I hit cancel here.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So that little X here, that's kind of tricky in some programs because sometimes that still means okay, and in this case it means cancel. So that was a good call though, because that would have taken a little extra time to calculate. So that's turned off. Now I'm going to go to Objects, and when you're on the Objects tab, you can select things and see information about it. So here in this design, this chair is called a CH3. It's in the furniture category. So you can see all the Revit parameters for this particular object. And you can add custom parameters and make some other adjustments. So like for this in-place family, which is this reception desk, you could come in here and adjust some of the properties. So the last thing I'm going to show you before I go to the viewer is on the Settings tab, you can adjust the units. So by default it matches, from my experience, what it was set in Revit, but you could change this if you wanted to. So once you've made some changes in here, you want to go to the Project tab and click Save. This is saving it based on the name that we provided when we were exporting from Revit. It just takes a moment or two to save. And then now I'm going to click on Review. So this is going to export, well, it's not really exporting, it's just defining the viewer model, which ends up being in the same exact file as the project in that folder I showed you. And so again, talking about things in a little bit more detail here, the setting that we pick here will have the graphics quality will have an impact on the visual quality and performance. So if it's a really big complex model, you might want to pick one of these lower settings. If it's a smaller model like the one we're in with lots of detail and lots of materials, we can crank the setting up. This can be adjusted even once you get in the viewer, as I show you, so it's not really a critical selection. It can be easily changed. I'm going to keep it at fantastic. And let's see, and then you can pick which display. So if you have multiple displays, those will show up here, and then which resolution. So I'm going to click play. And so once you're in the viewer, you can actually close the editor, you can close Revit, you're basically totally disconnected. So here we're in the law office model, and like I mentioned right away, you can see that the light mapping isn't showing up here. So we'll stop this now and switch to the shared model so that we can all see the higher quality model. And then if you're set up to do so, you can also follow along. The camera follow feature is super cool because it'll copy the shared model to your C drive, and when I'm moving the camera through the model, the only information that's being downloaded to your computer basically is the camera position, and you're moving around your own local copy of the same exact model. And so you can even see in the preview here that, well, I guess the preview is still showing a file that's from the editor, so it suggests the lights are there, but not really. So I'm going to open the Law Office A16 model. And so this is the opportunity where we could share the model. I think, Armand, are you going to like push out a share, or what do people have to do at this point?
No, actually, if you want me to share that, I mean, you want me to show that part, the camera share?
If you want to, because would they see me selecting tools and things as well, or they would just see the model navigation, right?
No, they will see everything, so that's why it's better that you would basically show, and I can just switch back from you the control if you want to.
Okay, so you want me to do the share?
Yeah, so when you go to camera share in the menu, you will see in the camera share that there are 10 people right now
Okay.
online working with this project. So basically you can imagine that this is your project team. You can invite them all. Okay.
Okay, so now that we're all in the viewer, and if you're not following, you can still see this on the webcast just fine. There's several points I want to highlight about things that you can do in the viewer that are really cool. So the first one, as I already mentioned before, was the fact that all the 3D views are here, so we can jump around within the model by just picking these different views. If there's a section box involved, that will be basically respected by the viewing software.
And now what Dan does right now, everybody who is in the project and follows him will see exactly and very smoothly his navigation, because in the GoToMeeting you have a huge delay, but right now whatever he does, it shows very smoothly.
Yeah, I can remember when I first saw the presentation of this, I was just blown away, because you have the GoToMeeting up, and then you also have the Revizto Editor up in your sharing, and the two were side by side, and the one through the GoToMeeting was just kind of, you know, like a bad old movie, and in the viewer here it was just incredibly smooth. And so I'm going to switch back to the starting view. Wrong starting view. So a couple of things then. When we're in walk mode, like we are right now, I can use the 3D mouse to kind of push the camera forward. I can tip the 3D mouse up, and I can tip it down when we get to stairs, as you'll see here in a minute. And whenever I show this to staff or clients, I always tell them to move very slowly so that you don't get kind of motion sickness, especially once you start putting on the virtual reality glasses. So here with the 3D mouse, and I guess you apparently can do this with the regular mouse and the gaming keys, but I can tip up as I'm pushing forward so that I can basically see where I'm going, just like I would if I normally walked up a set of stairs. And then I can look down. So here's the carpet tile with the 90-degree rotated pattern that was selected from Shaw Flooring, and here's the steel case furniture. And when you walk up and look at the wood grain, it's just really nice. You can see the quality of the textures. If I turn and just kind of walk right into the railing, because I know railings are not something I can walk through, I can push right up against it so that I can get a good view of this two-story atrium space. And again, because all the lights were pre-calculated and what's called baked onto the surface, the material is no longer just being tiled around like it would be in Revit. These tiles here actually already have the light mapped into them, so it's not being done as we go. So I didn't change this, and I think it's just kind of interesting to note that these 2x2 light fixtures obviously have too high of an output, so this hallway is like super bright. And so I can either go through that door on the left, or I can just walk through the glass, because I know I can walk through curtain wall and windows that go all the way down to the floor, basically. And so from this vantage point, I can see what this person sees within this office. Now, to kind of jump, I could keep walking through the model, and it's all.
Let me request the control from you. So basically, everyone who is in the session can just click on request control, and now you can see on Dan's screen that Arman is requesting control. Now, whatever he gave me the control, and whatever I do on my end, the way I will maybe move a bit more, faster. And if I, let's say, double click on any surface, you will see the same information on your end. So basically, all the manipulations, if I go to section cut and do, let's say, a box cut, you will see the same thing right away on your end. Oops. So everything, so we can remotely, in different offices, different locations, can manipulate with the model and create issues on a fly. And of course, this feature, I just want to mention, is not in a free version. It's in the collaborative part of the software. So you got to be a paid user to utilize issue tracker and this feature. Daniel Stine is requesting a control back, so I'm giving him back the control.
All right, so now, and that's great, because that was something I was going to show, and I see we're kind of running low on time, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump into a few other things. So in addition to just navigating the model, you can jump to rooms in the model. So there's a menu in the upper left, and there's a rooms tool, and so all the rooms that have been defined in Revit will actually show up here. So I can scroll down the list and find a room that I want to go to. So retired partner's office, or let's see, where else did I want to go? So we'll go to this, oh, here it is, so mock courtroom. Once I'm in this area, one thing that's really cool is the adjacencies show up while you're in this room mode. So here's the room on the other side of that wall. It's the visitor office. Looking to the right here, there's the library, room number 113. So my son plays a lot of Minecraft, and this reminds me of all the adjacent players in the environment. So that's super cool. The other thing is,
sorry, Dan,
the section tool.
Sorry to interrupt again. Can you add more people that came to your camera so they can follow your camera too?
Other people jumped in?
Yeah.
So camera sharing and invite all. That should do it, right? All right, so at any time you can switch between fly mode and walk mode. In the settings, there's actually a place where you can set the eye level. So for camera, the eye level is important. Maybe you want to experience this as an elementary student walking through a school. You can bump this down, or the field of view can be adjusted. Those are, I think, really important things to know about. I'm going to switch to fly mode, and when I do that, I can pull straight up on my mouse, and I can start to go up into the interstitial space and see all the ductwork and structure, and then I could keep going up all the way through the building. At any time, I can turn on this really cool section cut feature, and if I just grab this little symbol and pull down, very quickly and really responsively, you can jump around within this model with the section Another thing you can do, if I close this, notice there's like a separate toolbar right now at the top. If I close this, that'll stay active until I click back on it and hit clear. But at any time I can click on the measure tool, and this is super cool. It's like a laser measure. Any surface that you drag one of these ends onto, you'll see the distance. So what's the space from the edge of this desk over to the wall, or from wall to wall? If I turn off the section cut now, let me do that real quick. So I'll hit clear and then go back to measure. And if I drag this onto the ceiling surface, it just sticks to whatever surface. I can also just pick points. There's an option to do that rather than the laser measure tool. But that is super cool. And like I said, all of this stuff is with the free version of the software. When they first did this, it reminded me of like 15 years ago when I was sitting in the architectural office talking to my coworkers, and we're trying to figure out how does Google make any money. This search engine and this really nice email account is totally free. And of course now they're running the cell phone in my pocket. So I think this is a really interesting opportunity for everybody. So let me check. So we already talked about the fact that there's views, rooms, measure. If we double click on something within the viewer, it opens up the properties for that thing that we clicked on. There's also an option to record a video of your walking through the model, so that you can just basically make a video just by navigating through the building. So that's super handy. So we only have about 10 minutes left, and then we'll have time after that for questions if there are some. But I want to take a minute and show you how the Oculus works within the context of all of this.
Dan,
so I hit escape, and I'm going to select.
Dan. Can you please show the 2D sheet on top of 3D and, before you leave?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's super cool. Thank you for reminding me.
No problem.
And I'll have to. Should I re-invite everybody again?
Yeah. Just re-invite, because that'd be very cool.
You were just a little bit too slow for that. I have that in my notes. I just totally forgot about it. So because we exported sheets. Hey Rachel, how you doing? I know her. Let's see, I'm going to cancel that because I want to control here. So sheets. All the sheets that I exported in the model show up here. And this is the coolest thing since sliced bread, if I do say so myself. So we're going to go to a sheet that has some details on it. So if you have a view that has a live cut through the model, so floor plans, live sections, if I click on this little icon in the lower left, check this out. This is so cool. So it does a section box through the building and superimposes that view on the model. And in addition to that, which if you think about like a project manager doing something like this who's marking up, or a project architect who's marking up details, they can take this and drag it along the condition. So a lot of times when we're developing a section, we have to mentally think, okay, what's beyond this condition where I'm cutting right now? And by dragging this, I can all of a sudden see, oh yeah, that condition changes. There's not a transaction counter at some point along the path here. So I need to cut another detail and mark that up, possibly. And then you keep going and you see that all of a sudden there's a wall that is impacting this detail. And so what's holding up this long piece of counter once the base goes away that was supporting it? If I go back to the sheet view section and do that with the floor plan, so level 1 floor plan, and let's see, how come I don't see the little icon now?
Because it doesn't have a connection somehow from the Revit, so you can choose another level. See.
So here's the little icon, and when I click on that, it'll superimpose this view on the cut plane. So now I can drag this up and see the grid lines and the room numbers in the context of this really cool 3D view. You can actually adjust this so that you can still adjust the cut plane, but the view, the Revit view, would stay stuck to the floor. And then there's some other adjustments you can make, but that is so cool. And like I said, this is all part of the free software. The only thing that's the paid for, I don't know if that was made clear enough, was the sharing part of it. You'll notice that some of the entourage, so this particular model has just the free RPCs that come with Revit, and so these are mapped to some generic replacements once you get into the viewer, so you have some sense of scale for some of the people. All right, so now can I close this again, or what should I close it and then show the Oculus stuff?
Yeah, you can, sure.
Okay. So I'm going to close out of this, and so when you want to start using the Oculus, it's as simple as this. You go to the user manual at the website, and at the top there's a toggle between the editor user manual and the viewer, and on the right is the index, and here's Oculus integration. And so by following these steps, it's always worked every time, and it's super simple. You basically copy a file from this location on your computer to your desktop, and then you adjust that icon to have this force Oculus. So when you're using the Oculus, especially the DK2, there's this direct to Rift option, and so that makes it so that you don't have to like set up an extra monitor or do any additional settings. And I'm actually going to do this right now, and it's going to be super cool. You should be able to see it, no problem. So I have this icon down on my taskbar, and when I click it, I have to pick my quality level, and I hit play. And so I have the Oculus hooked up to this computer right now, and I'm not going to actually wear it, but what's cool, what I like to do when I'm using this is in a conference room, have a projector or a monitor hooked up so that what you're seeing right now on the screen is the same thing everybody else in the room would be seeing, so everybody stays engaged in the presentation, not just the person wearing the virtual reality headset. So in this viewer, I can look around, and you have this really cool menu in front of you. So I can double click on this, and it's going to load up the law office model. And once you're in this law office model, you have all these same tools. So I'm using my right hand to click the mouse, and then I'll go to this starting view. And then once I'm in this starting view, I can look behind me. I can basically turn 360 degrees, and then with my left hand I can start navigating the model with the 3D mouse, and instead of tipping the 3D mouse, I can just tip my head to look up and look to the right. And notice how that toolbar floats above your head the whole time. So once I'm done looking at the 3D views, I can close that, and then over here on the left, if you remember, that's where I can get to the option to see the rooms, and then I can start jumping around between rooms, or I can switch to fly mode and then just pull straight up, and I can go through. When you're in fly mode, gravity and collision are turned off, which makes sense, right? And so I can basically look anywhere I want. Again, you want to really kind of move slowly no matter what navigation you're using, because people can actually get motion sick from wearing these. It totally engulfs your visual perception of everything. One of the sample files on the Oculus website is this really cool roller coaster ride in a Minecraft environment. And although you're not in a motion ride that you're going up the roller coaster, and you can look behind you and see the tracks where you come from. And once you start dropping down, you actually grab onto the table because it's just kind of a wild ride. So, like I said, I'm just holding these.
But you're using the 3D connection mouse, right? Right now.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I'm moving the Oculus Rift in my hand. I don't actually have it on my head.
Yeah.
But in relation to that, though, I'm also using the 3D mouse.
Yeah,
So
and then we gotta say also that it does have automatic support to Xbox control. So if somebody doesn't have a 3D connection mouse, they can use either keyboard, but the keyboard is not very handy for Oculus.
Yeah, I've tried the gamepad too, and I think the 3D mouse is the best. I don't remember how much it is. It's like $100 or something, but you can move so nicely, and when you're putting it in a client's hand, a lot of them don't know these gaming keypads and the letters on the keyboard. So you stick a 3D mouse in front of them, and in like a minute, they're driving it like they've used it forever. It's really cool.
And if you want to like switch it off the menu which is hanging in front of you, you just click on the O button, and it will be hidden. And then you can click again to O. It will appear. So.
What do you click?
On O button. O.
Okay, cool. I just learned something.
Yeah. See.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. Because let's say if you want to just surf around without any distortion, then you just click on the O button, and that's it. It looks cool, I'll tell you, from the California perspective at least.
See, here's the replacement that Revizto throws in for one of the RPC dudes.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I had. Is there anything I missed that you want me to mention?
No, just, basically, Dan, first of all, it was great. Thank you. We'll come to the questions. Anybody who has questions, please go to the question menu in the GoToMeeting and start asking questions to Dan, so Dan can actually answer to them. As far as what you missed, you didn't miss anything because you were trying. I mean, you were giving your experience, and today you guys saw what you can do mostly with the free version of the software, which is basically you can do everything. The only thing what you can't do is share this through our cloud and have the very powerful collaborative tools such as Issue Tracker that we haven't covered today, and the camera share that you've seen today working with. But other than that, you've shown everything. Dan, can you see the questions?
I have it clapped, so let me check here. I'm not sure if I see the questions. Can you read them to me?
Sure. Does Revisto perform clash detection?
Yeah, some of these you'll have to answer.
Yeah, clash detection between models. Brian, actually, we don't do clash detections, but what we do, we have a direct import of clashes from Navisworks into Revisto. I mean, Dan, as of today, showed you the integration with Revit. I mean, the integration is the same, but whatever you've seen, it works with Revit, with Navisworks, AutoCAD 3D, SketchUp, ArchiCAD, and it has a direct import of IFC format of files and FBX. And from Navisworks, you can directly import to our issue tracker all the clashes and the clash list that you have generated in there and assign to the people through our issue tracker. Michael said, I'm not getting the link to the viewer. Michael, you just have to download the viewer from the website. If you don't have the viewer, didn't have the viewer before, sorry, we haven't mentioned that. But with the share, we don't see the room numbers nor the menus to bring it up. Of course, you don't see the room numbers and the menu because you basically see only the view of your counterpart, and you don't see the menu. As long as you quit that session, then you will see everything, because the purpose of this camera share is for you to your counterparts follow your view rather than work with the menu. If that makes sense to you. I don't know, Dan, what you can comment on that.
Yeah, I haven't used the sharing extensively, so.
No, I mean the share. It means camera share. I mean.
Yeah, I'm not following the question. Sorry.
That they cannot. What I understand is that they can't, when they're in camera share mode, they can't basically see the menu, and they can't see the name of the rooms.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't used that feature extensively, so that it could be the case.
Yeah. So it's the same thing for the laser ruler. Laser ruler can see only the one person who is measuring. I mean, you can see only the view, because we're not basically transmitting the video or anything else. We're transmitting the camera positioning. Does Revizto export? One second. Export work with linked Revit models? That's Chris who is asking.
Yes, that's what I did with the LHB office. It had a linked mechanical and electrical in it. And then when you double click, once it's in Reviso, it's basically like it was all in one model to begin with in Revit. So I'll load up this the LHB office again. So yeah, for those who didn't maybe connect right away at the beginning, might have missed that. In my first example, I loaded up this version of our Minneapolis office. And so let me switch to fly mode, and then you can kind of actually go up. And again, there's some little bit super bright lights here in this particular export. But you can see all the mechanical equipment. So like a VAV box in here somewhere. That's the sound attenuator. Here's the VAV box with the 12-inch inlet. That's coming from a linked Revit model. And once it's in the viewer here, it's just like it's in the regular model.
Okay.
One thing I forgot to mention too is that with this object setting mode, you can, once you're in the viewer, you can selectively hide things. So like I just turned off the doors. You can see that the doors disappeared. You can also make things like walls transparent so that you could walk down the hallway and see all the ductwork and the mechanical and electrical.
Or you can go to the filter on the top and filter by category. Let's say isolate only electrical, mechanical, and pipes, and you will see all that into it. You know that, right, Dan?
I do now. Oh yeah, it just made all the architectural.
Yeah, so you can click on mechanical, let's say. You don't, yes, you have it. Electrical, and let's say turn it off the architecture.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so you'll see all the mechanical right now in it. You can click on electrical, then it will show the electrical as well.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't played with this feature a lot. This is super cool. So here you can see our electrical panels with clearances.
So there is another question. David asks, how well does Revizto export from Navisworks? You know, we extensively we're working on the export of Navis lately, and you know, it is improved very much, and still working a lot on it. So if you have if you tried anything that didn't come through or something like that, you're more than welcome to send the note to our service department, service@revista.com, and we'll take a look at it. But as of today, it works pretty well. We have a lot of tests on that.
They're definitely wide open to suggestions. Like I mentioned, this model has 3 design options for carpet, and I just mentioned to Armin that it'd be awesome if Revizto could actually export the design options as well. So then in this view, I could toggle between the different carpet options in that study.
We have that in our development plan. We have some priorities to complete as of today, but you know, we have that in our plan. So is the rendering function worth looking at? I mean, rendering, I don't know, Dan, have you tried the rendering? But the thing is that the main purpose of this tool is not for rendering. The main purpose of this tool is to quickly export your Revit and Nevis and all other professional software projects made in professional software into fully interactive navigable environment, and share this with your team and collaborate and kind of coordinate, so on and so forth, work with your owner. And the real-time rendering is the most kind of, that's what we do. But we have a rendering option in the editor to render beautiful like renders, but that's not our key function. But still, you can use it because it does really cool and really good pictures if you do want to do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that exact 100%. I tried the rendering feature once, and if you were not a person who worked in Revit, for example, or Navisworks, then it probably might be a good option just to make some fairly decent still images.
Mm-hmm. So there is another question which says, will there be support to Samsung Gear? You know, the thing is that if you have, because Revista is actually designed not for only small objects or projects, it's designed for powerful and big projects. And still we're working to maintain, you know, the biggest projects that, you know, people are working. And, you know, for small projects, of course, the Samsung Gear can afford having those models in those devices, I mean, power-wise. Theoretically, we don't have that in our plan, but maybe in the future we'll take a look at it. As of today, it's not our priority, but you know, we can do the support, but it's not on our list as of today. We do want to make the support to the Google Cardboard, but that's even more likely to do rather than the Samsung Gear, because Samsung Gear is actually almost Oculus.
But on a somewhat similar note, the navigation on a tablet is quite nice. So you can view the model in the viewer on a tablet. Is it just the iPad?
iPad, Android. Yeah, viewers are available on all the platforms. And there's another question from Marine about the 2D sheet show up far from the actual model. That all comes from your actually source file. We are not changing anything. We're mathematically taking your position that your sheets are made in your Revit and overlay those sheets on top of the 3D surface corresponding to that sheet. So, but if you see something weird on your particular case, you're more than welcome to share with us to take a look at it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Marine says that also some linked models not showed up in correct place. Models are linked in Revit via shared coordinates. I'm not sure if I'm getting it right. Dan, can you understand that? Because we never had this kind of problem.
Yeah, I haven't had that in Revizto. I actually just had that last week trying to make a 3D PDF for a project, and it was a combination of linked and shared coordinates, I believe, and I'm not sure. I ended up for this particular problem, I just bound everything in a separate file so that I could get this done and out the door, but that was with a 3D PDF. So I haven't had that problem here.
No, we never had that kind of problem either. That's why I'm not sure, Maureen, if we understand you correctly.
Yeah, I would definitely submit it to support. I've sent them plenty of things, and I had an example once where the RPC person was about 300 feet tall for some reason, and there was some obscure setting in my Revit file. So they're pretty responsive when you send support tickets.
Yeah. So there is a question from Daniel. I want to show that on my computer. Let me just Revista team. Let me just switch back to me.
Sure.
Share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen on your end?
I can still see only mine.
Oh.
Now I see yours, and I'm sure everybody else does.
All right. So there is a question, what issue tracker can do inside of Revit? So basically, I'm not going to go through the issue tracker because it's a big topic to talk to, but in Revit, in Navisworks, you have these two icons. The icon that Dan was talking is the export icon, but another is the issue tracker. So basically, all your issues made in the viewer, you will see when you open the issue tracker, here you have the project, so which project you're in, you can correspond if you're in different. You have all the issues here, even the clashes, that because this project came from Rabid, but also I have the same project in Navisworks, so I run the clashes there, and I have this clash report in my Revizto issue tracker. So again, if I double click on this, it actually opens in my Revit in non-perspective view that issue that I can see and start working with it. This is particularly what concerns the clashes. But the issues, let's say this one, Windows should be, I mean, somebody just create an issue on the 2D sheet, or let's say on this section box issue. So, and each issue has its feed. And again, if I double click on it, it will open the same thing here in my Revit, the same file, I mean, not file, the same view. So, and I can work with my issues, and basically after I'm done, I can just open it. I mean, I can just change the statuses and comment it, so on and so forth. And it's all corresponded within email notifications, so on and so forth. I hope it answers to your question. And then let me just see what else we have here. Okay. I think that's basically it, what concerns the questions. Any other questions you guys have? Because I don't see anything else here.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for your attention. Like I said, I find the tool super cool, and hopefully you will as well.
Thank you, Dan, very much for your great presentation. I like the content; it's really awesome, especially the first model, because I didn't see that only at RTC. But you know, once again, when I looked at it, the details are pretty cool and pretty awesome. So thank you for your work, and thank you for your kind words about Revista, and we will like that, you know, you kind of value us as a user, and what we do is valuable for you.
Yeah, and the best part is, like I said, this is free. So as long as you have install rights on your computer, you don't have to ask your boss for any money to start playing around with it, which is the cool part.
All right. So thanks again, Dan, and thanks everybody for today's webinar and attending this webinar. The video will be recorded, actually is recorded, will be uploaded, and it will be available on our YouTube and will be emailed to all the guys who registered to this webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day. Bye.